Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We will now move on to the next part, which is our very first panel discussion for today. And the panel discussion, whose job is it anyway? Our facilitator will be Jennifer Morris. So Jenny, if you can just please join me on stage. Jennifer, Head Talent and Capability, Human Resources at Standard Bank. Jennifer will be joined by Brett Tromp, the CFO for Discovery Health. Brett, welcome. Please take your seat. And Susan Moore. Susan Moore, Managing Director of Furniture City, Dialabet, GNR, and EHL. Saren Pierce, Executive Director for Fresh Vision. Welcome on stage. Do you need any assistance with that mic? Are you going to just keep it like that? Is good?
Sure, I can figure it out.
Fantastic, no problems. Engineering guys, don't worry, you're not needed. Thanks. Relax. We move on, and we have Dr. Jerry Gould. Goule. Welcome, sir. Thank you. GM, HR and Transformation, Total South Africa. Vusi Umbuweni, Senior General Manager, Eskom, also with us. Thank you so much. And then last, but definitely not least, back on stage, Terence Harrison, Group Manager at ArcelorMittal. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our panel. If we can just welcome that with a gigantic round of applause, please.
Welcome, and thank you for subjecting yourself to a number of questions, both from me, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions from the floor. As you know, the participants really have had some quite interesting discussions this morning, hearing about the commitment that organizations have to talent, the investments that they're making into talent. And I guess the key thing that we want to focus on this morning is to get your perspective both on how well are organizations doing in really identifying and nurturing their talent, what are you doing in your businesses, and to what extent, are we actually getting it right? It's one of those things that I think leaders in organizations, chief executives, and talent themselves have been grappling with for a number of years. I myself am a talent professional, and I think it's one of those issues where you know that you need to build a talent pipeline, both for now and for the future. But often it's fraught with challenges, and particularly in the current environment where investment is an issue, to what extent do we believe that organizations are still investing in their talent and getting the kind of returns that they're looking for? So perhaps if we can kind of start off, Terence, with you. You spoke to us this morning about the value that ArcelorMittal places on talent and the degree of investment that you're making in talent. And I was particularly interested in how you started to make that shift from not only looking at technical talent, but really looking for leadership talent. In your business, when we talk about talent, what does talent look like in your organization? How do you identify it?
Right, we go through a number of processes to look at talent. It's all linked into our GEDP process, the Global Employee Development Process, and very much aligned with our performance management. So it's a system of identifying people who do have the right requirements for the job, and we link the two together. So we look at performance as well as potential. So we have a grid, and in order to qualify to become, it's a gatekeeper for your talents, is to perform at least at a very good level, which in our levels is a 3. So if you're sitting on a 3, that means you're performing 100% all of the time. So when you walk down the passage to get your tea, you don't talk to anybody. Right? So it's a very, very good performing person. And then on a potential level, we're looking at a level 4 upwards. Now, our level 4 is defined as somebody who has the potential to move up a level, and our potential of a 3 is to move sideways into an equal kind of level, so not taking on more responsibility. But behind that is the basic tool of looking at the classic circles of your engagement, your ability, the ability very much linked into our performance management system. And we look at the performance in terms of looking at the performance through your discussion against your contract that you've actually lined up for the person, as well as an assessment of where you are and where you're able to work in terms of levels of work. And then in the other circles, we do more now on a psychometric basis, because although we're looking at the engagement and the aspiration and the ability, when the manager sits down with the individual in a discussion, they kind of look at the definition of, are you a 4 or you 5 on potential? So it's really driving down to an external kind of assessment on that. And then when you put those two together, you have a very good performing individual with the ability to move upwards within the organization. And that's kind of where we pitch our talent. So you're 4 and 5 in ability, you're 3, 4 and 5 in terms of your performance. And from there we take it forward. So it's quite a process. It goes through career committees, etc., and then we get there.
Okay. And one of the holy grails of talent management is actually, what does potential look like? So if you are advising line managers or people around the room in terms of what qualifies somebody as having that potential, what would be some of the characteristics that you would look for in people?
It's quite a difficult one to answer, because if we go to the line manager themselves, and now I'm going to refer to a movie, they kind of look for mini-me's, right? So they want somebody there that looks like them and thinks like them. It's typically, if you own a bulldog, you sort of look like one. And it's that kind of scenario that you're going to break. So it's really about how we test people to be able to take on that next level of work. And that's what's very good about our rotational principles and driving that 70% is, when you see somebody and you think they've got that ability, you do a psychometric assessment to make sure that they do. And then it's about driving them through a process, giving them a bigger project to see if they actually work through the project and are actually able to deliver against the goals. And then over time you can actually see that person with that kind of responsibility moving forward, being able to tackle things head on, the kind of management that they have at that level, managing the project, making sure that they can achieve the goals. And it's quite a difficult work environment to work within. But however, most environments are difficult to work within. So that's really what we're doing. We're looking at that more on the technical side, a lot more on the technical side in terms of delivery, and that it is enabling them to move up the chain.
Brett, as CFO of Discovery, you would be guarding the finances and very interested in investment. If you look in Discovery, what's your perspective around the value that you get from investing in talent, and what would you do to develop that talent?
Sure. Guys, sorry, I thought this was an accounting conference. Wrong place.
You didn't tell him till just before he got on stage.
So for me, talent is, I suppose, getting 16 hours out of a person instead of 8 in a day.
That's productivity, not talent.
So the Discovery, has a wonderful culture of retaining people, and that's just inherently grown in the company. So we don't have a lot of turnover at senior level. So we do have quite a few programs. Some of the stuff we do, every year we hire high-performing middle management. We go and find them in the outside of our business, and we plant them with one of our CEOs or COOs, and they work with them for a year, and then we push them into the business. So we go and do that a lot. This year we've selected 20 very senior leaders, so guys probably under the CEO, COO level, and put them through a course at Oxford. So 20 leaders across the business, identified them, called it like the CEO program, and used a really big attracting academic experience, paid for in full, to drive talent. So when we say that, that was very expensive. So the investment behind it is substantial in what we do, and yeah, it works for us. I think Adrian's view is that you never stop looking for talent. So at every meeting, it's if you find somebody that's great, just get them, we'll find them a position. And that's really the culture of Discovery.
Interesting, and even in the the recession, to what extent does that philosophy of just bring in great talent and invest in that talent, has anything shifted in the way that you are investing in talent?
No, not at all. So we, that's just a factor of the market that we don't look at. And I mean, we've got to look through that. And our culture is, no matter what it takes and what it costs, find the best people. And I don't think we always get it, but it's really, really important. And one of the lessons I've learned personally was from an Olympic swimmer. And he spoke, I went to a presentation once, and he won a gold medal in the 1998 Olympics. Guy's name was Adrian Moorhouse. And when he finished swimming, he realized that his whole identity, who he was tied up in swimming. And one day he was looking through some photos, and he saw a photo of his coach sitting next to the pool next to him. And his coach couldn't swim, but he still managed to coach him how to swim. And he got this whole change in attitude that as a leader, as a person, he was responsible now for moving from the swimmer to the coach. And for me, that's what we drive in Discovery, is that it's one thing to say it's an organizational responsibility to drive talent, but as line managers and as leaders, we're all responsible to become the coach and drive that talent. Each person is unique. And I've worked there for 10 years, and one size doesn't fit all, and you've got to be quite specific in how you drive talent, and specific to each person.
And for you personally, other than the productivity and 16 hours, what do you look for when you are looking for talent? The qualities that you look for?
Yeah, for me, I look for passion. So first and all, passion. I generally, this is more on the academic side, I look at the maths mark, and I found people that have problem-solving abilities can do anything. So, passion and a good maths mark generally gets me the right candidate.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. And Susan, you've got responsibility for big business units within NREs. How easy is it to attract talent, particularly young talent, to kind of achieve some of your growth plans?
Lucky we operate in a very challenging environment. I think youth coming into business today, I think the academic side and the formal training is important. But I think even more important to youth coming in is their contact with the organization and having a look at sort of that connectivity. Young people want to feel that they belong and that they add value, and they want to be challenged and stretched. And the opportunity for organizations is to balance that with the formal structures and the formal academic lines, and look at mentoring, coaching, rotation of staff into different functions. You've got a 12-month time frame, and you've got to move your guys on and keep them interested in different areas of the business and do different things.
And is it easy to retain talent?
I think if people feel connected and they feel invested in, then that's easy to retain. And I think for us, for me, importantly, is the challenge that if I'm going to lose somebody from my team, I'd rather lose them into the organization and look for opportunities within the organization and not hold on to people.
And do you think that's something that's typical? This is a question to the panel. Do you think that that's something that's typical in organizations, or do people tend to hang on to their talent?
One, Jerry. My experience, I've worked for Total now for just over 10 years, is that there is a tendency by line managers, of course, to hold them to their talent. The good performers they want to keep because it's good for their bonus at the end of the day. So they want to hang on to those people. But we have a philosophy in Total. The first thing that we do is that no line manager is allowed to just think about their department. So when we bring particularly critical talent, of course, depending on the levels in the organization that you are bringing, you hire for the organization because you are employing for the organization. And we always say, if you hire this person today, 2 years down the line or 5 years down the line, where will they be in the organization? So we think about the career of the individual. We tend to hire for life. Okay, although we don't bind you in any chains to stay in the organization forever, but that's the philosophy within the Total Group, that we are hiring for life. When people resign, which they do, I mean, it actually should happen that at some point You want a certain level of attrition in the organization. You can't just say, but our philosophy, our approach is that we want to retain you and we want you to move around the organization. So mobility is one of the key things that we look for. Whether we are able to move within the organization, outside South Africa, into other parts of the world, that's a key thing that will be a factor that we look at. And of course we look for team players. Our key behaviors, for instance, I can mention this, that when we go out to the market to look for people, and even within the internal labor force, we look for boldness. So you take decisions, but you are not reckless, but you're going to be bold, you're going to try things. When you're confronted with problems, you're going to challenge those problems at all levels. So we look for boldness. We also look for cross-functionality. Are you able to work, or are you a silo mentality kind of person? This is my way, this is how I work, or you look across lateral, across the organization. We also look for people who are able to listen. And you pick that up. I mean, an interview, as you know, is one process of finding talent, but there are instruments that we use. But an interview can tell you a lot whether the person actually is a listener or not a listener. But we look for listeners because we believe that if you don't do that, we are likely not to succeed in our environment. And of course, we look for people who support others, mutual support. So we look for team players. And it is in that spirit that line managers then, in obtaining talent, must think about the other part of the organization. You can't just think, this is my talent. In fact, incidentally, tomorrow we have a succession planning meeting, in which again, twice a year we sit down and we say what's happening in the organization, where are people going? And we actually force managers to let go. Of course, there are people who are going to be possessive, but that's what we try to do.
Yeah. Great. You mentioned, talk about mobility as being really important. And often people, talented people, are headhunted. They're constantly on the lookout for new opportunities. What's your view on the pros and cons of staying within an organization to build your career or moving from different organizations?
That's a very good question. And it's you see, when you get headhunted, you get flattered. Yeah, I'm the man, I'm the woman. You feel like you are it. It's good to know that people view you in that light. But I think what's important is, this is just a personal philosophy, a personal approach to life, is to say, when you take a job, what exactly are you taking that job for? What do you want to achieve? Because you have your own personal goals. So headhunters come, and you have to make your own decision. It's good to be headhunted, but you need to not to lose focus in terms of what are you trying to achieve. I think the downside of being headhunted, particularly often, and you accept the offers, is that you may not really develop deep skill, depth. So you become superficial, and at some point it catches up with you. So it's important to develop depth, and then you can be it. You know, at some point, you can allow yourself. But the other thing that I think you need to think about when those opportunities come is, how fair are you to the organization that, particularly if they placed you in a very critical position that you are expected to, of course, deliver the business and develop people, and you just leave them like that. Sometimes your own brand as a person gets tarnished by that. But if you want to put the moolah in your back pocket quicker, sometimes that's the positive of it. That sometimes when that happens, you are able to call the shots, call your own price. So, but eventually you can outprice yourself in the market.
Yeah.
So it's very important to think very strategic. What are you trying to achieve as a person? What are your goals? And then to take those decisions. Sometimes opportunities, you'll be stupid to refuse them, so you move. You know, it happens.
And it was very interesting, I think, in one of the breakout sessions this morning, talking about career development and the younger generation. The perception is your baby boomers wanted to climb a ladder, your younger generation have more of a jungle gym approach. And that sometimes you might actually want to take a lateral move, or I think someone mentioned even taking a drop in salary to get the right experience to build long-term experiences. Sharon, you've had the benefit of being both in an organization, working for Coca-Cola, Standard Bank, and now as an external consultant have a probably different perspective on organizations. Do you think organizations are doing enough to develop their talent? And is it even their responsibility? Because surely the cream just rises to the top anyway.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure I believe about anything to do with the cream rising to the top so much on their own. I think it does happen. But let's start with your first question, Jane, which was about are organizations doing enough? So I think organizations potentially are doing a lot, but where I struggle a little bit is with balance. And I think this, you can't focus only on talent. So talent's one thing, but you have a whole bunch of other people in your organization that keep that organization going. And we would have referred to that, Jen, in our Standard Bank days as bench. And so it's really critical to understand what are the core capabilities you're trying to build in your organization and who needs to have them. So I think we create this kind of elitist view of talent is the one and only thing. I think critical roles are changing. I think the world is dynamic and moving so fast that people you identify today may not be the people you need tomorrow. In fact, the roles that you're getting them ready for may not exist in 5 years' time. And so balance for me is quite important. What are those core capabilities that you require? And then how do you build it quickly? So you spoke a bit about depth. The bottom line is that you will have people who rise to the top, but to your point about mini-me's, those ones that rise might be somebody's perception, at the end of the day. And it's really about trying to identify what those adaptive capabilities are and then being quite diverse, I think, in how you develop. So there are challenges. Younger generation, so we hear, are not going to earn their stripes at Coke. I mean, I was cleaning fridges on day one. I don't know how many people with a honours degree coming out of varsity would go and clean fridges today. Having said that, it built a hell of a lot of depth in me around business, and I didn't just clean fridges, I did a whole bunch of other stuff too. But the bottom line is, how do you build depth and do it quite differently? So I think they do a lot, and they throw a lot of cash at stuff. I think that cash should be partly directed towards building bench and solidifying your organization for the future, because I think it's not just about talent. Having said that, when you are investing in talent, are you getting the right returns, I guess was your question. And so how do you do it differently? So the only way to win for me in a very dynamic market is to do it quite differently. So how do you build that depth and breadth fast? Because you're not going to get a hell of a lot of time out of your younger guys, which is cool. And maybe by doing it in a very fun and different way, you might build retention for a bit longer. So if you're going to have 2 years out of them, build them very quickly within 6 months, so you at least get a year and a half of productivity, and do that quite innovatively. So I mean, we, in terms of building, global citizens, giving people the mobility experiences, in fact, you can do that without really moving and expatriating people today. There's so many different ways of doing that, and I think that's where, organizations need to be different. Sorry, you want an example?
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, you are Africa-wide, you have people in Zimbabwe and Namibia. There's the opportunity to swap people. They don't necessarily have to go out on expatriate packages. You could go in for 3 weeks on a business visa, come out, go back again in 3 months. But the key is to have really strong, structured learning and development plans. So what is the capability we're trying to build? What is it we want this person to do differently when they come back? And be targeted. Because going wide doesn't necessarily always help either. And so I think, by creating very structured experiential learning. So we've spoken quite a lot about development and all of that stuff and depth and breadth. But what we have to build is experience. And we have to build experience in people who aren't keen on waiting some time to get it. And so you have to think about it quite differently. So at Standard Bank, Jen and I have worked together in the past. But one of the kind of innovative programs that we developed there at the time was called an attachment program. So it might be a week, it might be 2 years. But how do I send you on an attachment that's very targeted? So if you're an HR person who's in a specialist center of expertise and who doesn't understand the context of Africa, how do I put you on a project in that space and ensure that you transfer that learning to the next person who needs to do that and do it quickly and effectively? And it doesn't have to cost huge cash. It can be done quite simply and effectively. But I think we get, some people get romanticized by Oxford and Gibbs and all of these cool things, but actually I would question whether they're even ready after those programs. Because yes, it does bring some worldview, and it's quite theoretical at times, but is it giving you the experience to be a better CEO? Maybe, maybe not. I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah, thank you. And Vusi, you are a senior general manager at Eskom. You've got a wealth of experience. If you look at the kind of balance between the role of an organization and the role of the individual, what's your view of where that balance sits? whose responsibility is it to develop talent?
Yeah, it's quite a tricky situation. Sometimes need to create some balance in that. I think in the challenge where we are in South Africa currently, where there is an expectation, obviously, that we need to create equity in the organizations to reflect the demographics. Sometimes it does create a situation where obviously there's certain individuals who then would have those opportunities as well in terms of development and taking advantage of them. However, at the end of the day, there is a balance in which one needs to strike, in that surely there should never be an expectation, a role by individuals, and they sit back and say, I'm expecting to be given this. I have a degree, therefore you must give me this. And there comes in the challenge. So that's on one side. The other side is every organization's desire on talent is ability to execute. And I think individuals, sometimes academic qualifications are good, CVs are good, talking is good, listening is also good, but you must be able to execute what you're given. Because I am a line person, so a lot of people, I think, generally in the world, and maybe South Africa in particular, are very good at developing strategies and visions. But now walk the vision, then suddenly there is some cold feet. So now the organization has to develop the ability to select those people who are able to lead in that field in terms of, so that's the organization's role. Who are those people who would take us to the next level? And the individuals are the ones who is going to rise to the top and take the challenge. In our case, we obviously have got huge challenges. We've got very big plant across the country. And we've got very varied technical and non-technical fields. So we're really very attractive for young graduates. But something I've wondered always is there is a natural selection about who will then rise to the top, because when there is a real big challenge, let's say there's a technical challenge we can't solve either on a plant like a boiler or something like that, and we say, look, we need to stick it out on this particular plant. Who are those people who will manage and take this and solve this problem and take it to the next level? You should see how many few volunteers you get. So by seeing those less volunteers, natural selection comes into effect in terms of who are those people who are willing to risk and be able to take on the challenge. And by that way, then you see that there is talent in that regard. So that's how I would view that kind of balance between organizational goal and individual responsibility.
Thank you. I'm going to pause in my questions and open up to the floor. For any questions to the panel from the floor. Yes. Do we have a mic?
Perfect. Here we go.
I'd just like to pose a question maybe to the rest of the panel and to use the same words that was used in the panel. We need to innovate in terms of breadth and depth, and I share the same sentiment, because otherwise we go through this very extreme timeframes to develop individuals who are hungry to grow. So I'd like to know there's organizations sitting up there that run 24-month programs, 3-year programs, in the engineering environment, sometimes 5-year programs to develop talent and make them experts. Having heard that it's maybe time that we need to innovate, what is the panel's perspectives on innovating in terms of creating breadth and depth? Do they share the same sentiment? Is it now time to go back to the drawing board and change some of the stuff that we've already got existing?
Give it a
go. So, I mean, I think we need to think about things in terms of business realities and whether something's fit for purpose. So, I'm not saying you can shorten the amount of time it's going to take to make an engineer a good engineer, right? Because there's like maths involved and stuff. But what I am saying is that sometimes we can think about doing things differently. So, I mean, one of my most recent interactions with the CEO was around, you know, our teams want mobility. These guys only join us because they know we've got operations in other areas and they want to fly around and we've got to send him to Namibia or whatever the case may be, and we've got to send him for a year. And my point was, well, why a whole year? You know, because if all you really want is develop X, Y, and Z, why don't we do 3 months, come back for 3 months, add value in his current role, see the transition, go back 3 months. So when I say innovate, I'm saying there are different ways to structure learning and experiences to build depth and breadth that can be done in shorter, quicker, and more innovative bursts that actually develop and embed skill. So if I use a typical example, I'll use a training program and I'll use HR professionals because I have a passion for HR professionals doing their jobs properly. So, I mean, one of the things that we often do is we'll, you know, write out these huge SOPs and or competency frameworks, etc., and people must be strategic partners. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so already thanks for that, but how? So what we tend to do is we put people in these big programs and we teach them about OD and we teach them about, you know, this is what HR is all about, etc. But there's a way to do it slightly differently, and that's through practical experience. And so I might bring you into a room for a day, but I'm going to send you out there and give you coaching and or other methods of experiential learning to make sure that what you do sticks. And then I'll bring you back for another day. So rather than have people on 2, 3, 4, 5-year programs, have them do what they need to do in very much shorter bursts. And so that would be an example of how you get that done. However, you know, to kind of make sure somebody can build a bridge without falling down might take a little bit more time. You know, so it's all about fit for purpose.
Susan? Sorry. Susan, I think it's important on the job development and on actually doing it. Just because you Googled it doesn't mean you know how to do it. And I see so many young people coming in with the academic levels and great intellect, but they fall short often in team dynamics when they've got to roll it out and use their EQ behind the leadership skills. And so sometimes it's going down and spending time developing that part of your development and getting some depth in the EQ side of it. Because often you have the IQ, but you fail on the EQ.
Can I just build on your point? Because I think the EQ thing is also one of those things you can't necessarily train in a classroom. And I think where our battle as talent professionals always is with line managers and the role that they actually play in the active development of people. So we often outsource performance management and feedback to coaches, right? Because it's just easier to pay someone else to make the problem go away or to fix it. And I think as Susan's talking, kind of one of the biggest things for me is part of making development of talent work is sometimes giving the development to the line manager. And that's also another thing we need to think about.
Now, I just wanted to say that when it comes to what I may want to call, yes, it's innovation, but it could be a shortcut, and we've said we can't really have shortcuts. Just to reflect, I've come from the IPM conference in Sun City this morning, and I listened to an organization called Harambe yesterday. One of the things that they said, their research that they've done, is that 12% of positions in South Africa are advertised. And now, basically, to get as part as recognized talent, so there's no enough room for people to come through. But a significant statistic that they mentioned, which shocked me, is the fact that you have 60% of this population of young people who will not have a formal job in their lifetime. 60%. And what they have started to do to try and get young people into employment. One thing they've picked up is that in terms of potential, there is huge potential that their assessment shows them from the townships. But when it comes to some of the requirements, which then is what we're talking about, how can you innovate? How can you do all these shortcuts? Their research over the last 5 years has shown them that you need to open opportunities for people to develop the basic requirements in order for them then to do the stuff that they need to build on. So engineering we cannot take shortcuts. If we have said all the bridges will come down. So we need to make sure that people understand exactly what it is that is required. And this is across professions. It's not just, even in HR, you can't innovate because you can innovate, but there's a certain level.
Not on payroll.
Great, thanks. Other questions? Yes.
Here we go. I'm coming that way. Just 1 second, please. Hope you didn't hear this question on Google, as you got there.
Hello, my name is Seko from Gymnastics Federation. I'm just interested, maybe from any of your panels, how you deal with salary scales, trying to retain talent, and perhaps some of the industries with their high levels of, remuneration for key positions versus what some of the industries are struggling with, which is labor unrest. Saying that the salaries for certain staff. It was interesting what you said. One of the panelists said about balance between talent and the rest. How do you deal with that? Because to retain talent, one of the key is to actually pay them well, but then you get the pressure from labor to say, fat cats, or I don't know, being overly paid versus giving people jobs or paying the rest of the people well. I'm just interested to hear who has something to say about that. Thank you.
Yeah, look, it is always traditional. When I was young, I always thought money solved everything. But when I grew up, I realized that probably solved everything to my wife, but so not much about me. So I really needed to look forward to going to work, and I need to make sure that I have a purpose about what that purpose is to make a difference. Job satisfaction sometimes is absolutely important. Like for us at ESCOM, you'll find that there's a lot of attraction on the technical side because, and even on the non-technical side as well, because there's real challenges and there's real growth, which you can be thrown at. Technically, that gives you quite credibility. So you need to balance the whole issue about high income or throwing money at a solution versus actually balancing it out in saying, do these guys have meaningful work? There's a lot of people you give them a big package and you give them a good title, and you put them in a corner office and tell them, look, you can go when you want to lunch, you can come back when you want, you don't have to come to work if you don't want. I tell you, that person will resign with a high salary. So that is that balance. In terms of the union issues, it's a real thing we're grappling with as a country ourselves, in that these income differentials, and at the same time, for me, the challenge is the competition for skilled staff has not so much to do with South Africa on its own, because we lose staff internationally. And if you need to strike a balance between South African salary scale and trying to balance those salary differentials, and at the same time be able to be competitive internationally. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just something you have to continuously work at. I'm yet to find a manager who will tell me they've now found a solution where they really are just drinking tea with the unions and everything is good. It's just a continuous something you have to work at, and it just gives you good improvement, high blood pressure and low blood pressure. So,
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
Any more questions? This one there.
Hi. There seems to be a lot of success in talent retention and talent management at the higher levels of the organization. A challenge for me is how then do we retain the talent at lower levels. In my space, I work in a retail environment, and what is more important for me is retaining a very, very good branch manager. But the competition is great, and it's intense, and unless we pay more money, it's difficult to keep a very, very good branch manager. So maybe one of the panel members can share with us how they've managed to cascade it down to the lower levels.
I'll give it a go, but Susan, you obviously work in a similar space. So. Alrighty. Free advice for you then. Jokes. No, so I think my biggest challenge, and I think in the retail banking space, even more recently, and then in the manufacturing space with Coke, is that I don't think we identify talent at the lower levels fast enough. So I think we don't even know who they are, and we don't know whether they even exist. And so I think we spend a lot of time on identifications for critical roles. And I'm kind of the talent person that tears up the 9-block grid, and I'm also the talent person that says critical roles are for the birds. Because actually, you know, somebody who's 21 years old or 22 years old, you can't identify what critical role they might get into. But you know that branch management, it might not be the senior role in the organization, but it's absolutely critical to making your business turn. And so how do we figure out who those people are, and what does good look like? And let's define what that is. And what good looks like is going to be very different to what it looks like for who are the people that are going to strategically take this business to the next level and succeed the CEO. And I'm not sure we get that balance right either, because it's actually, a branch manager doesn't need to be the next CEO. They need to be what they need to be. And I don't think we spend enough energy on identifying those key areas of our business. I was talking about balance earlier, and then going low enough, quick enough to figure out who they are. Because by the time, you get there. I mean, like these oaks they've gone. They last 2 years and they disappear. I mean, and Jen knows, I used to get really frustrated with line managers who thought graduate programs were the bee's knees. Because by the time the graduates get to middle management, by the way, they're gone. They're not there anymore. So, they're not going to solve all of your problems. And so other strategically clever ways of doing things are to do, I think Discovery, you've highlighted it, is use associate programs. So bring in people who have got 2 to 3 years experience, build that pipeline of branch managers who have been in retail for a bit. They might have been tellers in a bank, they might have been working on the floor at Edgar's, or whatever the case may be, but that you've recognized potential in people who haven't quite made it, but that can get there. And what you do is give them meaningful work, and so the likelihood of retention is greater. So think about what's your entry pipeline, and how do you build that pool differently?
If I may add to because your question was around really the retention, how to retain when you have all this turnover. Sometimes, as I've said, turnover is good, but sometimes it can kill a business. So what we do in our space is for every person who resigns or who just decides that they're going to leave, we actually do exit interviews. The key thing with exit interviews is to understand, sometimes people have to go because they have to go. My family is going to Australia, so we're up and going. That's fine. But find out what is it that they like. There's something that as managers we don't like. But people don't resign from organizations, they resign from managers. Something happens that triggers a resignation. And whatever you do, the person is out the door because a relationship has just been triggered that is not nice. So it's important to find out and come back to the senior team or to everybody to say, by the way, these are the lessons that we're picking up from these exit interviews. What can we change? Sometimes you lose people you don't want to lose. It's a loss to the organization. Sometimes you lose people who say, good and score, my friend. But so you need to learn. We need to learn from that and then try to change the culture. Act on what people the feedback that we're getting from those exit interviews. Sometimes it's not easy, and that's why HR work sometimes is very difficult, because you have to confront in a nice way managers to say, my brother, my sister, what's coming out of your area is this. We can bring you all the people, but they'll always leave because there's something not right within the culture that we have in your section.
And just one other tip around this, and kind of a passion point for me is there's something called integration, and we often think talent separately from performance, separately from learning and development, and it's very frustrating when that happens. You know that you can't live in your organization without branch managers, so until you go fully online, those branch guys are key. But think about the future and their development too. Okay, well, we could be doing online shopping in a few years' time. We might not ever have branches. There's that strategic thinking process, which means these guys also need to be evolving. So what level of investment are you placing in branch manager development versus strategically more senior talent? And how do you evolve it in a way where you link kind of this is the performance and what good looks like of branch managers today and going forward, and continuously raise the bar, because they will then not want to go either. So you're taking meaningful work and meaningful development in a bench sense, because all branch managers need to be trained in a particular way, but at the same time knowing through that process who the guys are, they're going to become regional managers, etc., etc., etc. Make it more meaningful and different. I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
Great. And I'm going to take one last question from the floor. And while Ashwin's walking across, just one observation from my side in terms of how do you identify people at low levels for really critical roles. I think an organization that put a lot of energy and effort into that was SA Breweries, where their critical roles were not leveled at only at the senior level. So they spent an enormous amount of time and energy on their sales reps, on distribution capacity, capability. And I think organizations often get sidetracked by the most senior people and senior roles. Last question from the floor. Hi.
Thank you. I recently watched an episode of a documentary on CNN about Huawei, a telecommunications company in China. What they did, they got institutions around China for young talent, where they give the youth the opportunity to be innovative and give them the resources to implement their ideas. Now, the CFO of Discovery said that they sent some of the top talent to Oxford. And I just wanted to find out from a patriotic point of view, they're trained in corporates in South Africa, especially South African founded corporates. Is this tendency of having associations with the Harvard, INSEAD, Oxford, Cambridge? What about institutions like WITS, UCT, UP? Because so much of economic development depends on research and development. So when we send our talent to these universities, isn't that sort of sending a bad image to our local universities and showing a lack of confidence in what they can do? So from your perspective from the panel, what are you guys trying to do to make sure that the tertiary institutions in South Africa can have more confidence in saying that as institutions we do contribute to the economic development of South Africa?
Great.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't quite see it that way. I think, when, if you look at the talent pool in Discovery, and most of them are South Africans, and they've come through all of our universities, and they produce some of the best doctors and actuaries that we've ever seen. We've got the chairperson of the Actuarial Society, worldwide chairperson, who works as our chief actuary. So he's seen as the head of all actuaries around the world, and he works for Discovery, came through BITS and so on. So we're very for our local universities. We hunt a lot of talent out of them, and we're very pro them. I think it also comes to a stage where you've got senior guys that have worked for a period of time, and I agree, the jury's out whether they're going to make better CEOs because they've gone to Oxford or Harvard. But what it does do, not only on a retention side, it gives a leader that we're now trying to retain in the business, and there might not be a promotion, but a very aspirational goal. So for example, Oxford was selected because it came out as the #1 university in the UK. It's come out as ranked from a large survey of CEOs as being the people that they would most likely select. So it had all these aspirational things that we wanted to offer to our guys, to say that being part of Discovery, being part of our executive leadership, we're going to give you a different view and a best. So it wasn't definitely sending a message to our local university saying we don't back you. We do. They're producing what we have. But at some point, you can't just look locally. That was very inspirational for a lot of people, and also just opens your eyes. It's just also a bigger world out there. And on that point, Discovery is a global business now. It's in China, UK, Asia, America. We can't just think that our local studies and universities are going to equip us for everything we do. So that was some other part of the thinking.
It's important to have a global perspective as well.
And then just in closing, we have a room full of talented people. I'm interested, Susan, from your perspective, what has been some of the most challenging experiences for you that has really shifted your career, just on a personal level?
Hard work. I think I'll give an example this year. 2013 in retail for me has been one of the hardest years I've had in retail. And I work for Ellerines and African Bank, so you would have read about us in the newspapers. But I've learned more in the last 12 months. I'm fitter, I'm sharper at what I do in harder times than when you have it easy. And it's been a great elevation to the next level. I'll never do business again the same way as I have done in the last 12 months. So I think it's really about being out there and making it happen.
Sometimes it's worth gritting your teeth and working through it.
Absolutely.
And Terence, people can often derail their careers in the striving to be noticed or being ambitious. What are some of the watch outs or advice that you would give to people in terms of things to be careful of when managing your career?
I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks is the comfort zone. So you get into an area where you really enjoy, and that's really what you want to do, and you become a total specialist in it to the point you don't want to move out. And if you can get a mentor that looks after you and they convince you to move, it's not very long after that that you realize, wow, I was in a comfort zone, and look at the phenomenal growth I've actually experienced after moving out of that zone. So I would say don't get stuck, don't get locked down into an area. Have the passion, that's very important. You know, I always say it's all about the passion of the person, because knowledge you can provide, but you need the person to have the passion and the energy. Just don't get bogged down. Look out there, see where's your next step, where it can take you, and take on the challenge. It should be a challenge. You don't want to do the same thing over and over. Accept that challenge, knowing it might be daunting, but that in itself really pushes you and develops your career. And the total, what I would call the EVP, the employee value proposition, is very important. So drive those factors, never be scared to take on a challenge. I always say you tackle anything as long as you know you're always going to be successful and you plan it that way.
Great, thank you. So hopefully out of the discussion, I think Chris put it very well this morning that actually it's a total system. So it's the role of the organization and the role of the individual to be successful in managing talent. And a thank you to the panel for giving up your time today. I really appreciate it. And a particular thank you, Brett, that in spite of your health insurance, you didn't stick to your commitment of rugby tackling Ashwin. Okay, thank you very much. Cheers.